Zoom, and I'm the one who's insisting on using Zoom. Right. Has it started to
It
record
has.
now? Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
it has. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the first Relevance Researchers Network meeting of 2026. We haven't had any of these for a few months now. We focused on the conference last year, so we're really excited to have a program for the next few months in place. And our first speaker is Aglaia, um, who is going to be presenting a talk with the title Illuminating Pragmatic Proficiency, Corpus-Based Assessment of Implicature in Secondary Classrooms. So I will, without further ado, pass over to her to.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, and thank you for being here today. My talk is entitled Illuminating Pragmatic Proficiency, a corpus-based assessment of implicature in secondary classrooms. The talk reports on a corpus pragmatic approach to assessing pragmatic proficiency, focusing on implicature comprehension and production in high school learners. Drawing on classroom purpura and public dialogue data sets, I operationalize implicatures such as scalar, relevance, and manner, and annotate learner responses with reliability checks. I then introduce a lightweight rubric that integrates frequency, felicity, and repair strategies and compare human ratings with rubric-assisted scores. Results indicate that rubric-guided corpus prompts improve inter-rater agreement and surface teachable patterns such as hedging and contrastive connectives that can predict successful implicature recovery. I close with classroom assessment tasks, open materials, and a roadmap for scaling the method in low-resource context. So methodologically, I combine a classroom corpus with public dialogue data sets to build prompts, operationalize implicature types, and annotate learners' responses with explicit reliability checks. Pedagogically, I introduce a lightweight rubric that integrates frequency, felicity, and repair strategies, and I compare unaided human ratings with rubric-assisted scores. So I will proceed with 4 steps. First of all, the assessment motivation, the operational framework for implicature types, the corpus-based annotation and reliability workflow, and finally, a practical set of classroom assessment tasks and a scaling roadmap for low resource context. Okay, just a minute. All right. So why is implicature important and why should we assess it? In secondary classrooms, much of what matters communicatively is not literal. Teachers routinely use mitigated criticism, indirect suggestions, and relevance-based cues that depend on shared goals and interaction. Learners may decode the propositional content accurately, yet fail to recover the implied stance, evaluation, or intended action. This becomes an assessment problem for 2 reasons. First of all, many standard language assessments prioritize things like grammar, vocabulary, and literal comprehension, while pragmatic proficiency is either weakly sampled or relegated to a small number of discourse items. Second, when pragmatics is assessed, scoring can be opaque. Judgments may be made holistically with limited documentation of why a response was judged appropriate or inappropriate. So, the central problem that I addressed is how can we assess implicature in a way that is both ecologically valid and auditable at the same time? My argument is that corpus-based prompts and a small rubric can help towards that direction, not by replacing expert judgment, but by structuring it. For this reason, I adopt a corpus pragmatic stance. Implicature is treated as a set of observable patterns in interaction, cues, context windows, and uptake, rather than purely introspective interpretation. Operationally, I focus on three implicature families that are frequent and instructionally relevant to in secondary settings. So first of all, we have scalar implicature, where a weaker term invites an inference that is a stronger term is not warranted. Classic cases involve quantifiers, for example, like some versus all, or graded adjectives such as good versus excellent. And the assessment target is whether learners infer the intended shailing or imitation. Secondly, we have the relevance implicature, where the meaning depends on linking an utterance to the conversation goal. Here, the target is whether the learner can connect an apparently indirect response to what is being asked or negotiated. And finally, we have the manner-based implicature, where marked phrasing, hedges, vagueness, or circumlocution signals politeness, as uncertainty, or mitigation. The target is whether learners can infer stance and pragmatic force, and whether they can produce appropriately mitigated responses themselves. Across these families, I define explicit triggers and expected inferences so that annotation and scoring do not rely on rater intuition alone. The data set that I use is intentionally dual sourced. The validity anchor is a classroom corpus drawn from secondary settings. In my study, this consists of 60 learners of high school, broadly of B1 level of English according to the Common European Framework, producing 8 hours of recorded interactions transcribed into words across 6 lessons. From this corpus, I extract a number of candidate implicature episodes, and I annotate learners' responses for comprehension, production, and repair. To extend prompt coverage and create reusable task materials, I also draw on public dialogue datasets. For example, the daily dialogue contains 13,118 dialogues and 102,979 utterances, providing high-frequency everyday speech acts and adjacency pairs. The Cornell Movie Dialogues corpus includes 220,579 conversational exchanges and 304,713 utterances, offering a broader stylistic range and pragmatic moves. Importantly, public dialogues are used primarily for prompt generation and contrast sets. Classroom data is used for interpretability, instructional alignment, and evaluation, and this helps balance the authenticity of the dataset. Now, I'll describe the annotation pipeline, which is designed to be lightweight and transparent. Each unit includes a context window, a candidate trigger, the implicature type, and the learner's uptake. The workflow proceeds in the following 4 steps. Step 1 is the episode extraction. I take short context window, typically 2 to 5 turns, sufficient to establish the conversational goal. Step 2 is trigger identification, which is the lexical cues such as quantifiers, hedges, and contrastive markers or relevant shifts. Step 3 is type assignment, scalar, relevance, or manner. And step 4 is learner response coding, which captures whether the learner recovered the implicature, produced an appropriate implicature, and whether they deployed repair strategies. So let me illustrate this with 2 examples that we have here. Example 1 is a manner-based mitigation. So a teacher says, that's interesting, maybe we can make it a bit clearer. The trigger is the hedge, maybe, and the evaluative interesting in a feedback position. The implicated meaning is a softened critique. The student's output is not sufficiently clear. A successful learner update is not simply yes, but a revision move or an acknowledgement of the critique. In annotation terms, this is coded as manner implicature, with uptake as successful and repair as self-repair if the learner immediately revises. In the second case, example B, it's a case of a scalar implicature. A learner says, I understand some of the instruction, and the trigger is some in the comprehension report. The implicated meaning is not all. So a successful interpretation is the teacher or peer responding with a targeted follow-up, such as which part is unclear. If the learner instead treats some as equivalent to all, the implicature is not recovered. The goal of these examples is to show that annotation is not merely labeling, it links linguistic cues to interactional outcomes that are visible in the classroom discourse. So because implicature involves inference, reliability is a central part. The reliability procedure has three components: rater training, double annotation, and an explicit adjudication protocol. First, annotators received a short guideline with definitions of each implicature family, trigger list, and several boundary cases. And second, a subset, or in some designs, it can be a full data set, is double-coded independently. Agreement is computed separately for type assignment and for uptake because these can diverge. Raters can agree that a case is manner, but disagree whether the learner successfully recovered the implied critique. Third, disagreements are resolved via adjudication rules captured in a decision log. This decision log is not administrative overhead. It is a mechanism for making the scoring model more stable over time and across new raters. A typical disagreement looks like this. One rater codes a teacher's "that's interesting" as neutral, while the other codes it as mitigated negative evaluation. The adjudication rule is then in feedback position. Interesting plus a mitigation cue, such as maybe or a bit, defaults to a manner-based implicature of soft and critiqued unless subsequent uptake shows clear positive alignment. This yields a few benefits. It improves inter-rater consistency, and it produces pedagogically meaningful categories that can be taught explicitly. So with the annotation scheme in place, I introduce a rubric intended for classroom assessment. The rubric has three dimensions. First, we have frequency, which asks, does the learner deploy or respond to implicature cues at all, or do they do so in relevant context? Second, we have felicity, which asks, is the implicature interpretation or production pragmatically appropriate given the conversation goal and constraints? And third, repair, which asks, when the implicature is not immediately recovered, does the learner use interactional resources, clarifications, requests, paraphrase checks, or formulation to repair the understanding? So each dimension can be scored in a small scale from 0 to 2, so the rubric remains usable in the real classroom time. The purpose is not to over-quantify pragmatics, rather it is to provide a shared scoring language that reduces drift across raters and makes feedback actionable. Conceptually, the rubric links assessment to learning, frequency responds to noticing and repertoire, felicity to appropriateness, and repair to strategic competence under uncertainty. I then evaluate whether the rubric changes rating quality. The comparison is between unaided holistic ratings and rubric assessed scoring applied to the same set of learner responses. In the unaided condition, rater scores pragmatic success overall, typically based on an explicit model of appropriacy. In the rubric-assisted condition, raters follow the three-dimension and record brief justification notes, such as the trigger that motivated their inference and the evidence in learners' uptake. The headline result is that rubric guidance tends to increase inter-rater agreement and reduce calibration time, particularly for borderline cases where a response is linguistically accurate, but pragmatically misaligned. In my data, agreement increases significantly with rubric assistance, with the largest gains in the uptake and repair categories. The interpretation is straightforward. The rubric does not make pragmatics objective, but it makes the basis of judgment explicit and therefore more consistent. A key advantage of corpus-based assessment is that it surfaces patterns that are both measurable and teachable. Three patterns are particularly salient. First of all, we have hedging and stance marking, items like maybe, I think, or kind of, often signal mitigation and politeness, and they also cue learners to treat an utterance as non-literal or non-final. Learners who attend to these cues are more likely to recover intended meaning in feedback episodes. Second, the contrastive connectives, such as but and however, which are reliable signals for pragmatic correction, disagreement, and realignment. In classroom discourse, these often co-occur with repair and with negotiation of task goals. And finally, repair strategies themselves, clarification questions, confirmation checks, and paraphrase, which are strong predictors of eventual successful recovery, even when initial inference fails. From an assessment standpoint, these features explain variance in pragmatic success. From an instructional standpoint, they define a concrete syllabus for pragmatics development that fits secondary classrooms. I close the applied section with three classroom task formats aligned to the rubric. Task 1 is a dialogue completion. Learners choose or write a response that preserves the implicature in the short context window, and this targets production and appropriateness. Task 2 is an inference plus evidence kind of task. Learners state what is implied and underline or cite the cue that licensed the inference, and this targets the meta-pragmatic awareness and helps separate guessing from justified interpretation. And task 3 is a repair and rephrase kind of task where learners either write a clarification question that would resolve ambiguity or rewrite a direct utterance into a mitigated version appropriate for the classroom context. These directly operationalize the repair dimension. All these three tasks can be delivered in 10 to 15 minutes, more or less, and the rubric allows for quick scoring while still producing meaningful feedback, particularly when feedback highlights specific cues rather than global judgments. Finally, I outline a roadmap for scaling in low resource context. The method is designed to be incremental. Step 1 is to build a microcorpus. Even a small set of recorded classroom tasks can yield dozens of implicatory episodes if you focus on high-density contexts such as feedback, disagreement, or negotiation, for example. Step 2 is to annotate a small seed set, perhaps 50 to 100 episodes, using two raters and a simple decision log. And step 3 is to reuse the annotated episodes to generate prompts including minimal pairs and contrast, successful and unsuccessful inferences. If tools are available, annotation and scoring can be supported by lightweight templates. If tools are not available, the core can still be implemented, of course, with a spreadsheet and clear guidelines. The key design principle in this case is to keep the unit of analysis small and the judgment rationale explicit, so the method remains feasible for teachers while preserving reliability. To conclude, I make three claims. First of all, implicature, often treated as difficult to assess, can be assessed credibly when we operationalize types, annotate short context windows, and document decision rules. Secondly, a corpus-guided prompt does more than test learners. It can reveal teachable pragmatic patterns, especially hedging, contrastive connectives, and repair, that can be targeted instructionally and tracked over time. And third, a lightweight rubric, like the one presented, integrated frequency, felicity, and repair, can improve the rating consistency while producing feedback that learners can act on. So, thank you for your attention, and I welcome any question or any comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I will open the floor for questions. If anyone would like to unmic and speak or put their hand up. The floor is open. Give people a minute to think.
Thank you, Glea, for such an inspiring presentation. I really appreciate the clarity with which you bridge corpus-based analysis and classroom-friendly assessment. Your work opens genuinely productive avenues for thinking about how learners recover indicators and realistic context. My question connects to an earlier point. I've noticed the same situation in Brazil now. There are very few classroom activities that really work with implicators in classroom. Why do you think this happens? And what do you see as the main consequences for learners' pragmatic performance in your work?
Well, I can tell you in the case of Greece, which is, let's say, a certificate-oriented kind of country. So all students are expected by the end of the year to have obtained a certificate or to take exams at the school level. So this kind of teaching runs through all the subjects, and especially in English, the fact that teachers have to teach at least 1 hour per week grammar and 1 hour per week vocabulary and readings doesn't allow them to have the space to introduce pragmatics and to solve these kinds of problems. Also, from my experience, when a kind of misunderstanding happens in classroom because of pragmatic reasons, the teachers mostly switch to their mother tongue. They just explain that to Greek, and that's the end of discussion. And this is not very helpful because it's not a resolution, it's actually an explanation in their L1. That's why.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's the same for native in Brazil. And when we are teaching Portuguese for Brazilians, the same thing happens. There is a few activities regarding pragmatic issues. Now, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do either of you have a sense of, why that is? Do teachers not kind of see the importance of it? Do they not recognize it themselves? Like, what's the reason and what could be done?
Okay, one reason is has to do with teacher training, of course, and that in the guidelines that are provided, they're free to use the so-called mediation. So they can take advantage of the L1 of the students, which can be helpful at some point, of course, and they can show the language differences and explain some things. But in my opinion, a total physical response, especially with older students with bigger classrooms, this could be more helpful. And the second reason is that they don't realize that some of the mistakes that the students do is because of pragmatics. They assume that it's their poor vocabulary or because they don't pay attention. And at the point of teaching, they don't realize that there is a pragmatic kind of gap at this incident.
Yeah, the implicatures come so easily that we almost don't notice
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
making them, and then
sure, sure. They
it's
don't
almost an
realize,
awareness.
yes, that
Yeah,
this is an implicature.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Other questions or comments?
Thank you. It was really, really interesting. And yeah, as someone who also teaching English, it's very, very sort of, yeah, something I need to think about as well. I was thinking though, these examples of implicatures you're showing, it's to some extent like predictable, if you will. Sort of like not formulated, but there are so many different types of implicatures. Like humor will be one of them, like weaker types of implicature. So once these, how can you then develop some sort of teaching recommendation for not so standard type of implicatures?
Well, in the case of my research, I tried first of all to notice what are the types of implicature that
Mm,
mostly appear in the context of classroom.
mm,
And of course, I also had a look at the textbooks that
mm,
the students are officially taught. The implicatures were very few. I
mm,
remember that it was a percentage like 3% of exercises, like 4% of exercises took advantage of implicatures.
mm,
So, in order to, not to have a very broad, as you said,
mm,
kind of coverage, I try to stick to the ones that appear mostly in classroom, which
mm,
have to do with misunderstanding, and secondly, with those that appear in their textbooks. But of course, yes, it's a very broad topic. It can cover many different kinds of literature as well.
mm. Yeah, and I suppose that would also depend on the level of students
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
yes.
Like once
Right.
you hit certain levels, limiting your context to classroom or
Mm,
textbook cases might not be enough for students to
mm,
go further. So
yeah.
yeah.
I think that in
Mm.
my research, the B1 level was the minimum that I could work on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I suppose like the higher the level becomes, the even more complex.
Yes,
Yeah,
intricate.
it
Yeah,
is.
it's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting,
Thank
very
you.
interesting. Yeah. Thanks.
I don't know much about second language acquisition, so I've got a question, but it's kind of, it might be very ignorant or stupid question. I guess it's something that's always occurred to me about second language acquisition pragmatics, particularly coming from like a relevance theory kind of perspective, where we're assuming these kind of universal principles that underpin our
Mm,
cognition.
mm,
Why do they not carry over? I mean, this is a big question, probably not, I've always wondered why do they not, is it the effort of the second language that kind of interferes with them, that makes us just, is it the focus on sort of translating words into in and coping with the just the basics that kind of block
Yeah.
students from making those, because it's almost like, well, we should automatically be looking for relevance, so these should happen,
Mm.
I would think. So is there, and this is maybe just something I'm just very ignorant about, so I'm
No,
just
no,
curious.
no. No, it's a good question. I think what you said, that translating from their L1 is a big issue, because unfortunately it is still being encouraged in the Greek setting, at least.
mm,
They're given lists of words that they have to study. They have to produce text using these words without paying emphasis on the relevance. Um, Yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big topic, and it's also connected with the kind of certification that they are asked to take at
Mm,
the end of the year,
mm,
which is very, it's a multiple choice form. It is limited in terms of time. So they just want to have the knowledge, put it on paper, and pass the exam. That's a big problem.
yeah. And I think something similar happens. Erica Massey from the University of Limerick also works on second language pragmatics, and she works on in the context of Japanese language education. What she was looking at is so she's trying to raise awareness amongst teachers that pragmatics needs to be part of their curriculum. But when they talk about pragmatics, they talk about speech acts. They don't talk about inference. So they say, so okay, let's do pragmatics in Japanese, how to apologize or how to send the invitation, how to thank. Basically, that is almost like learning a phrase, right?
Mm.
So I think that's the quite big issue where pragmatics in second language acquisition is stuck at the politeness and speech act. Well, topics like yours, implicatures, seem to have sort of overlooked really. So I think what you're doing is really, really important. That brings the focus back to the core of pragmatics, that is inference. So yeah, I think Erica's now working on teacher education as well. So if you want to look up her profile, she should be somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
I have one. Did you find some challenges for RT framework when you apply your research or method or so?
Well, the first problem had to do with the familiarity of the students with the context, with the concept of implicature. Of course, I hadn't explained it to them in an explicit way with technicalities and terms, but they couldn't understand, the difference between all and some and what effect can have
Mhm.
that to the listener. So that was number one. And the second one had to do with time limitations. I think that if the research could take place in a school for like 4 months' time, it would be much better to get them into the notion of implicature and see how they evolve during that period. So yes, having more time would be definitely a benefit.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts or comments? No? Okay. Well, I think it was a really interesting talk and lots to think about, and just an area that I don't think about enough, I think. So it was really, really good to start thinking about those other areas, particularly get out of our usual little areas that we focus on as researchers. So thank you very much for your presentation. A really nice way to kick off the 2026 program. So yes, a round of applause. So we are continuing to do one of these on the last Friday of the month at this time. We've been trying around different times to see what works with the worldwide community that we have, which is always tricky. So hopefully this works for all of our membership. So our next session is on the 27th of February, and that is Tim Morton and Mengyang Ki, who are presenting work from the project that they're currently working on, searching for relevance, pragmatics, and effective science. So we'll be shifting to a slightly different topic, and that will be on the 27th February, same time, similar place. We will circulate a link in the week or so before for people to join, and we will send further details round to the mailing list. Any questions or anything? we will close up. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for coming. Lovely to see you. And hopefully we'll see you in about a month for more of the same.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oops.